Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session with Rob and Josh. During our last session, we were talking about the great isolation due to the COVID-19 virus. Josh, how's it going?
Oh, I was about to say very good, but there is this virus. So yeah, I mean, I'm holed up and we're in for the long term. But yeah, I mean, given the situation, things are great.
Right. And you're with your parents, right?
Yeah, my mom and stepfather. My dad lives elsewhere.
And you've been there for how long? How many days now?
Tomorrow, and I think before I might have said that this is the longest I spent with my mom since the 80s.
Uh-huh.
But I might have, even then in the 80s, I was still going to high school, going to school, not
Right.
in the same building. So I think that
Right.
would have to go back to the 70s
Right.
to before kindergarten.
Uh-huh. And how are you holding up so far, all things
It,
considered? Are you
yeah,
rekindling? As we were talking about the last time, are you rekindling a relationship? Are you learning something new about your mom, your stepdad, or even something new about yourself?
yeah, there's, I'm picking up that, did I tell you about the thing with the manager that I had back in 2003, 2004 at the company who,
Why don't you discuss? You guys have like come to an agreement, and if there's an issue, you discuss it. Did she hear your
yeah.
side, your side? Okay.
So I picked that up about my mom. It didn't occur to me that my stepfather did something similar too. So, and so this week there was an altercation.
Hmm.
There was an article showing pictures of New Delhi and the skies before and after in various cities around the world.
Right.
Before, you couldn't see down the block, and after, it's clear blue skies. So I show them because it's dramatic, the difference.
Hmm.
I show them to my stepfather, and as he's looking at them, I go, "This is why I don't fly. I don't see how someone can, like, I see my contribution to this." And he's kind of grumbles, and then a little while later, he goes off to do something else, and he comes back and he's like, we have friends who are, they proselytize, and we don't like that, and you're doing that.
Hmm.
And just, I have my decisions that I've made for myself, and you've made your decisions for yourself. I respect your decisions, but the way you're talking, it's like, it's very annoying. And he asked me not to talk about it anymore.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, well, I would like to talk about something, and he would like me not to talk about it. There's certain things he talks about that I prefer he doesn't talk about. One solution is I don't talk about it, but then that leaves me not talking about one of the things that's more important to me.
Hmm.
Another solution is he just deals with it. I don't, and you could do a compromise somewhere in between, maybe 50% or 75% or 25%. That doesn't seem to me, that's a compromise. It's not the worst thing in the world,
Right.
but I prefer to understand what the problem is and see if we can find a way that I can talk about and he can understand or something like that. I'm also thinking, if I just say something and he feels uncomfortable, that doesn't necessarily mean that I did something to make him feel uncomfortable. It could be I caused to surface things that are already uncomfortable within him.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that's the case. It might be.
Right.
So I just listened to him when he said what he said. And it took me a while to think about it, to come back to how to follow up. Because at first I wanted, if I'd simply responded in the moment, I believe that I would have responded reactively,
Right.
defensively.
Hmm.
Oh, you're attacking me. I can say what I want.
Right.
But that would not be particularly constructive.
Hmm.
And I could, by the way, I imagine from another person's point of view, maybe this seems obvious. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
Because when you're in it, you have long standing relationships and you can't get away from each other,
Right.
you know the story. And, I think about it like at night when I'm falling asleep, like, how do I approach this? And it's not just problem solving, but it's also what's in my heart when I want to talk to him. Am I trying to get back at him? Am I
Right.
trying to appease him? Am I trying to negotiate with him? There's lots of different ways you can resolve conflict. And they're different with family than they are with a work colleague. And work colleagues, it's different if they're a peer, if there's someone who reports to you, if you report to them. This one I haven't dealt with in a long time. I don't I don't know the last time I was dealt to have a loved one, someone
Hmm.
that you can't get away from,
Right.
and they ask you not to talk about what's most important to you. Not most
Hmm.
important, but really high up there.
Hmm.
I could, and what I'd like is someone supporting me, even if they disagree with me.
Okay. Well,
So
that's
how do I approach it is kind of what I'm playing with. And I spoke to him today and I said, you know what you said, let's talk about it over the weekend because today was a really busy day. And he said, okay, we'll have like a beer or scotch
right.
and we'll talk about it.
Right. So that's interesting. So I'm just listening to what you're saying and I'm just making little notes. And just in case everyone is wondering, we're just going to let this conversation go wherever it leads us, since everyone is in isolation and you're probably experiencing the same thing. But so just getting back to what you're saying, said how to talk about the untalkable or to talk about something that's important to you that someone else doesn't want to talk about.
And
Or it
it's not
makes it
obvious why he doesn't want to talk about it. There could
right,
be many reasons. He didn't exactly say what they were.
right. And it makes them uncomfortable. Well, how do we talk about the untalkable? Especially when you're in isolation, so to speak, and you're trying to look for things to talk about because there's nothing else to do. So, as
Yeah.
humans, we want to talk. And a lot of times, when you're in a situation like this, you start going into areas or bringing up things that might not be comfortable for the other person. And a lot of times, that other person, or you don't realize that it's uncomfortable, and that other person might avoid it, might not say anything, or a lot of subtle hints, and might shut it down. But how do you get around it and still be able to wake up the next day and smile and say hi? I'm still here and you're still here. I mean, if it were any other time, people would just shut down and you go your way, I go my way. We don't speak for another week or so. But you can't do that now. And as I was saying during our last session, you're rediscovering people that you've known all your
Yeah.
lives, but there were certain things you didn't know about them, or you knew about them, but you chose not to broach the subject because it was uncomfortable. And that's how a lot of people deal with things. They just, okay, you go your way, I go my way. So I think you gave an example that when you were working one point and there was a situation that came up and the manager said, okay, I want to hear your side and the other person's side, and let's see if we can, get a resolution. And that happens quite a bit in corporate America. Sometimes it doesn't. You have someone who's cutthroat and they'll go around and, do all this politicking. But how do you do it? So I guess you guys are going to have this beer or water summit tomorrow.
Yeah.
And you got to talk about it. So, I mean, you're passionate. Well, like you said, you don't know what it is that he doesn't want to talk about
Yeah.
necessarily.
I think that if it comes out, he'll probably support me, and
Hmm.
but I can't say for sure.
Right.
And yeah, and one of the things I've learned in life is that I believe to meet someone and foster a relationship, that can be common interests. It could be that you happen to be in the same place at the same time. I find that the the main indicator of how long a relationship will last is how well you can resolve conflict together.
Hmm.
I take it as a given there's going to be conflict. No two people see eye to eye on everything. And
Mm.
so there's going to be some times when I want up, you want down, I want left, you want right. And how do you resolve those things? And that's why I've put so much effort into conflict resolution and negotiation as things to learn,
Right.
not just business things, but all relationships.
Right. Conflict. Do you think that there's always going to be a conflict in a relationship, and that in order for a relationship to be a relationship at any level, that conflict will arise? There's going to be a
Yeah.
disagreement
Well,
at some point.
I don't think that no, I don't believe that any two people want exactly the same thing all the time.
Hmm.
I mean, we just have different values and different things. I mean, sometimes if it comes down to like, I'm hungry and there's only one sandwich left and you're hungry too, maybe I want the sandwich and you want the sandwich. That's a conflict.
Hmm.
Even if there's plenty of sandwiches around in general,
Hmm.
maybe at this particular moment, there's only one. And
Hmm.
so we're going to differ.
Hmm.
Now, in general, with people, I know that I know that anyone that I'm dealing with, there's going to be disagreements, there's going to be conflict, but there's also going to be points of agreement as well. So
Hmm.
I, I view people as, the way the language I use is everyone has a lot of facets. And I can choose to interact with the facets that I don't like, or I can choose to interact with the facets I do like. I try to do that. Sometimes it's kind of, I'm no Dalai Lama. Sometimes I find people really annoying and I just assign it to them. I say they're like a horrible person or something like that. I try not to do that.
Right.
Empathy is the ability to not just see the world from another person's perspective, but also feel how they feel. And that means you have to imagine having had their experiences and their hopes and dreams and their abilities and their disabilities, and not have your own. That's hard to do. Sometimes it's easy to do. This is one of the big things. So you and I talk about talking across the aisle, I guess is a cliche way of putting it. People don't do a very effective job of, why would someone do that thing? Like, that's why I find picking up a piece of trash a day is such, if I walk down the street and I see trash, a coffee cup that's been put on a signpost, like or I don't know, just a fire hydrant. Someone had litter in his or her hand and said, I should really throw this away. I don't know if they thought this, but they just put it down in a public place and walked away.
Right.
Would you do that?
No.
I don't. The mindset to do that is hard it's very uncomfortable for me to get to a place where I think I have litter and I'm just going to make it everyone else's problem and just dispose of the problem. I'm not going to deal with it.
Right. And if I could just add to that, because this past weekend, I went out with my video guys and we were taking pictures, doing a video of the city being just like completely empty. And we went in a car driving around and we were like, showing different people what was happening on Facebook. And at one point we got out and we were walking around. And I saw litter strewn about the streets were these plastic gloves, blue, white, see-through. And I was just wondering, I'm like, why the heck would someone take off their glove, which is supposed to be a protective glove, and okay, I'm done with it, and just drop it?
Yeah.
No, I didn't pick it up because I'm thinking I don't want the virus, but I couldn't conceptualize why someone. So I was speaking with these guys and I'm like, and I was telling them like, look at this. We're trying to protect ourselves, but someone actually took the time to put on a glove, a protective glove. And at some point, I guess they got tired of it and decided, okay, I'm done with this. I'll just drop it. Are you serious?
Yeah. And so now put yourself in the mindset. Like, there's no logic behind it. I presume that there's something inside them that says, this is okay. This is normal, or this is acceptable, or this is advantageous.
Well, I got one even better. I don't think they were even thinking. It was just a matter of course. They know what's happening, and they would probably be the first to say, oh, we've got to do this to protect ourselves. We got to wear the protective gear. We've got to have the mask, et cetera, et cetera. But when it came time to dispose of it, they had no, second thought of just, okay, I'll just drop it on the street and keep going my merry little way. I don't get people like that.
Yeah. And they're missing out on what I consider one of the great human experiences, which is stewardship, which is, this is to be a part of something greater than yourself, service.
Right.
I mean, it really, my experience at West Point has been transformative for me, of the feeling of service and honor and duty I mean, I mostly work with professors there, but I also worked with the cadets, and they are the feeling of the taxpayers are paying for me to be here. This is for others. That is such a great environment to be in, and it made such an impression on me because my connection to West Point was ultimately through Frances Hesselbein, who was a Presidential Medal of Freedom honoree, and her phrase is, to serve is to live. And when I first heard it, I thought, those are words to me. Service wasn't that big of a deal for me. And then West Point is just this, anyone watching this, if you're American, if you're not American, and you're near New York City, go to West Point and take the tour. And now I'll do a little not name dropping, but I was invited there by a 4-star general. And so I was doing these workshops, leadership workshops with him. And you get great treatment when you're with the 4-star general. And West Point, honor, duty, service. Dropping your gloves on the ground and walking away. I can't imagine anyone choosing that life over this life.
Mm-hmm.
It's convenient in the moment, but what are you living for?
Right.
I mean, you're living for something. There's definitely something. They're not like, I agree with you. They probably weren't saying, I want to litter this. They're probably thinking, I'm going to go over there and this is not necessary. Whatever. They're going to something, not away from something, probably. They're not saying, I want to make the world messy. They're saying, I'm busy with something else. But I can't imagine what they're busy with being more important, bringing them more joy, bring them more reward, fulfillment than consideration of community, each other, the people around them. Even when I saw the video of you, one of the videos of you by the Oculus, and even if there's no one around there, there's still a sense of other people. That's what it is for me. And I like that. I prefer the responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, it goes back to someone wrote a book, The Purpose-Driven Life. I think that most people really don't have, well, they say they have a purpose, but they really don't. When you really narrow it down and you ask them what is the purpose, they really can't tell you. They can't tell you what's driving them, why they're here. So they just act. They just be. They are who they are, and that's it. Every day, life goes around, and they don't think. I like to have like a reflection of my life. Every so often, I'll sit back and I'll reflect as to the things I've done, where I've been, where I am at the current state, and where I want to be. Some people don't do that. They just wake up, they live, that's it. And, just that's who they are. So when you mentioned to your stepfather about, well, this is, who I am and whatnot, and you said he thought about it, and he came back to you and said, well, let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
It's interesting because that's who you are. And it seems that in order to get to know you, that's a part of you that you want people to know about.
Yeah. When I had
my podcast, can a person get to know Josh without knowing that part of Josh? Is it possible? Is it possible for anyone, for you to, because I know you, and I've known you since, and I'm still getting to know you, I think since we met at and we always go back to this, at the Google workshop. Then we had our first sit down, I think it was in December. But had it not been for that, if we were just meeting on a casual basis and struck up a conversation, we say, oh, well, this is a nice person to talk to, and we kept talking, would that part of you come out? Would it manifest itself? Or would you? Okay.
Yeah. Well, yes, it would come out. Although I think to get to know me, I'm sure there are people who know me even in the past few years who haven't come across that part of me.
Uh-huh.
They'd be missing a big part of me. And he doesn't get, when I spoke to my mom on my podcast, and she said, I don't have a passion for not flying like you do.
Right.
I don't have stop me if I said this last time, or if I've said it too much, that I don't have a passion for not flying. I have a passion, for stewardship, for the people at the other end of I was born into a polluted world, and I don't like that.
Right.
And I can't undo the past, but at least I can not pollute it for the next generation.
Right. But had you not been spending this time with your mom and your stepdad, would they have known this side of you? Did they know it to this degree? Okay.
They get part of it, but not the deeper part. Actually, that's why Leadership Step by Step and the book and the courses that it's based on
Uh-huh.
So much about it is how to make another person feel understood, how to convey to the person that you understand them so that
Mhm.
they feel, yes, you understand me. It's a very powerful feeling. And
But is that important as to who you are? I mean, and I ask this because again, there are so many people who will be listening to this, uh, and who are in isolation, and they're probably with someone. And even if they're not, there are people that are connecting on Zoom, on Skype, FaceTime, all these different, mechanisms, social mediums, and they're getting to know other people. I think I read somewhere that internet dating has like really picked up. They don't meet face to face. They're only dating online. And I even heard some weird story about people getting married. And I don't know how true that is, but again, I mean, we're at our most vulnerable now. And I think that a lot of relationships are going to be created. A lot of people are going to get to know people that they thought they knew. And a lot of things are going to be exposed and found out. And once all this is over, will those relationships continue? Are people going to regret what they told the other person about them, the real them? I mean, I think about women who are now, they can't go to the beauty shops, they can't get their nails done, their eyes done, extensions, and all this other stuff, their hair dyed, et cetera, et cetera. So the raw person is there. The husband has to see that raw person, the significant other, or whomever it might be, is having to see this raw person. And in the middle of that, because we're so vulnerable and some people are afraid, this is when we let our guards down and we really show who we really are. Will we be able to move forward or go back? So now with you and your mom and your stepfather, I mean, I wonder if they're having conversations when they go to bed at night as to who is this guy?
yeah,
Who is Josh? Like we thought we knew Josh, but wow, this is a different person. What are they telling your sisters? Are they like, man, I mean, do your sisters know who you are? This Josh? Or at when did this Josh come about that say that they didn't know, who you are now? Like when you left home or something, you're like Josh, the younger brother or whatnot. Now you're Josh, someone else, you know, concerned about, living your values. So I say that again, just for people who are watching, and I'm wondering if they're thinking the same thing. You take a step back and who did I share something with that I would have never told anyone? Or who am I exposing myself to in a sense to be the real me, who I am? Do I need to do, and why am I doing it? Do I feel the need to connect to this person, to bond? Or do I just want them to know this is who I am? I think about that when I hear stories about people that are coming out to their family and they're like, well, I wanted them to know this is a real me. And this is, I don't want to live a fake life anymore. So this is me up front, accept me or not. So in this current environment, being in isolation, I wonder if the same thing is happening. If the true person is coming out.
have you witnessed in yourself things?
No. I try to be, transparent, open in every sense of the way. No, I mean, friends have called me and our conversations are the same. I think now, however, they're listening to what I'm saying because usually when there's a conversation, they're talking and I'm saying things, we're sharing and whatnot. And I don't think necessarily that they were listening because they'll come back and say, you said this. And I'm thinking, yeah, I did say that about 20 years ago, and only now you're remembering it. So I find that interesting. And when I talk to my siblings or my mom, things that they'll say, and I'm like, oh wow, right, we did say that. So I and that just opens up something else. Are people listening more now, more so than they had been? Because we're living such busy lives. Now we really don't have a choice because we can't say, oh, can you hold on? I got to run to the gym. Can you hold on? I've got to go do this. I've got to run the kids here. I've got to do X, Y, Z. All that's on hold now. And if a person does say that, you can say you're lying because you can't leave your house. So I wonder, will we become better? That's something else. Will we become better listeners after this?
Now we have the opportunity to learn these skills, to use this situation we can do what we want. And one thing we can do is connect with each other more. I think, a lot of people, I've said this before, a lot of people have told me it would be impossible for me not to fly. Suddenly, they're not flying.
Right.
Now, they're not flying because, one, they're locked down. Two, their own personal health is at risk.
Mm-hmm.
Someday it seems that someday there'll be a vaccine, and someday we won't have to worry about these things. And there's a chance that they'll go back to flying. They probably will. But for the time being, they're not flying. This may sound like semantic, but people can choose not to fly. So they're doing it for their own reasons. Even if they can't because it's against the law or whatever, they could say, I'm choosing not to fly right now. And it's a different mental mindset.
Right.
But once you choose not to fly, that means, what are you going to do instead? Mm-hmm. It's a different thing. I think it's different to figure out what to do when you've chosen to be where you are, rather than you have no choice in the matter. And all these people who said I couldn't fly, they could tell me now, Josh, I'm doing it. I'm not flying. Right. With a smile, as opposed to with a feeling of missing out or whatever it might be. Because I think that the difference in mindset, and this is not the only way to achieve this, to say, how am I going to use this situation to improve myself? I mean, certainly Nelson Mandela and Viktor Frankl come to mind a lot. Mandela was in jail, in prison for 27 years, a lot of it with hard labor, forced hard labor. Mm-hmm. This is not that.
Right.
And Nelson Mandela, while he was in prison, there was kind of a global birthday party for him with like 100 million people attended. That's, and he was human, no more or less human than anybody else. Viktor Frankl was in Auschwitz. This is not Auschwitz. And he wrote a book about bliss and love. And we have the ability to make our lives, the meaning of our lives, I believe, what we choose to make of it. And someone might say, Josh, you're privileged. Okay. Viktor Frankl in Auschwitz, tough to call that privileged. Mm-hmm. And yet he was, unless you believe that our situation now is worse than Auschwitz, if he could do it, why can't we? And if we don't know how, now's the time to learn. I could pick any number of other people.
Right. But then the skeptic would probably say that if Viktor Frankl or Nelson Mandela hadn't gone through what they went through, would they be the person that they turned out to be, or would they have gone a different route? Do you follow me?
The way you put it there, if that helped make them who they are,
mm-hmm.
that almost frames it as an advantage to go through a crucible.
In
which case, we have that advantage now.
True.
It's kind of funny when a lot of people say, oh, I wish I lived at a time of when some great reformer was around, or some great historical figure, because they had this big challenge that they had to face.
Right.
And if only I did, then I would rise to the occasion like that too. Mm-hmm. It's a weird state when one gets to saying, I wish that I suffered more. But if you do most people, when you read why you're living an ordinary life in this context, lots of different ways it could come out. Mm-hmm. But if you really do get to that place, then Martin Luther King in the I Have a Dream speech, I think it was the I Have a Dream speech, said, unearned suffering is redemptive. Mm-hmm. That's he was talking about people being, with the fire hoses and the lynchings and the dogs, and that I agree with him. If you make it that way, we have that choice. Mm-hmm. people think that I'm depriving myself by not buying packaged food. But that's if what you're looking for in life is pleasure and convenience and comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm giving up on those things. But meaning and purpose are something different than physical pleasure or convenience or money. I mean, it's nice to have all of them, but if I have to pick, I choose meaning and purpose and emotional reward.
Mm-hmm.
And there was suffering before COVID. There'll be suffering after.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a different sort at each moment.
Right.
This is the type that we have now.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, suffering, it's kind of funny because there's this phrase, pain is inevitable, suffering is a choice. Or misery.
It's a okay.
So solitude, if you don't know how to handle it, can be really horrible. I mean, even in prison, solitary confinement is, you don't want. I've never been in prison.
I can't imagine. But so then it goes back to what I was saying, that we didn't want this. It was forced upon us. So we're now hunkering down with people that we either love or we hate. And once this is over, those relationships, what happens? Like you said, though, this is an opportunity for us to look at ourselves and, I mean, really find out who we are, what we're made of. And if there are relationships in our lives that we want to continue with or not. Do we want the self that we're sharing to people or with others? Is it the real self? I tend to believe that, it is. When we have no choice, we can't put on the airs or hide behind. I mean, for like almost a month now, you've been with this person. And I say that considering that the environment that we're living in, the technology, where we're able to hide so much stuff, we can't hide anymore. The real me, the real you is coming out. I can't see a person being able to hide it. I mean, it's impossible. So it goes back to what you were saying when we started out, the water beer summit. Now, the only way you're going to drink the beer is if the beer is whole grain or someone made the beer. Other than that, you're not going to touch the beer. So
I've been thinking about that because I don't really, yeah.
Right. So, he might say, oh my God, even the beer, you can't have a beer with me? What is up? So, like I said, water. So that part of you is you're sharing because that's who you are. Right?
Yeah. It's also, that's who I am after a month here. Who I am depends. That song, Bittersweet Symphony, I'm a million different people from one day to the next.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if there's a real me. It's
right.
I'm responding to my situation. He's responding to his situation.
But what it had, let's just play it back. You made the comment, you saw the pictures, you made a comment, and then sent it around. This is right. I don't fly because of XYZ. What if you hadn't said anything?
I would feel, I'm mostly not saying things because there's a lot of pollution going on here unnecessarily.
Uh-huh.
And mostly I'm like, I'm in their house, whatever, I'll let it, I'm not trying to, I can't change everything all the time. And when there's a chance for something to come up, I'll share a value that they might not have thought of. But they keep interpreting it as, I want to not fly. Like I want to protect the environment. But the environment matters to me insofar as it mediates it's other people. I don't care about the environment on some uninhabited planet.
Yeah. But the one that you're living in. Okay, so let me play the devil's advocate. Okay, so you saw the pictures, it came up. Why would you just walk away? Why even share that part of you? Did you know did you expect that response from him, or did you think that there would have been a conversation with, oh, you really think that way, and why do you think that way?
Yeah, I thought he would look at that and think, when I talk to them about not flying,
Uh-huh.
they talk about how much they love their trip to Italy.
So you had spoken to them before about not flying.
Oh yeah, I mean it's 5
Okay.
years. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. So this is just an extension when that came up. So you saw the opportunity to bring it up, and
Yeah,
you brought
I
it up.
thought I'm glad you asked this because I hadn't thought about this. I wasn't trying to stick something in his face.
Right.
I thought they think flying equals Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Not flying equals no Italy.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think of flying. Yes, there's Italy. Also, there's the jet fuel coming out the back of the jet. There's a military maintaining the supply lines. There's people displaced from the land to drill the oil.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of other things. And decades ago, there was plenty of skepticism about the science. There's still skepticism, but I don't see it. I mean, it's just overwhelming to me.
Right.
And others may disagree. That's their business, but it seems
Mm-hmm.
overwhelming to me. And I want him to see the side that to me is important.
Right.
And
But important to whom? To
I
you?
think that
Like,
I don't see in them. What, say it again?
I said important to whom? To you or to him?
Yeah. Look, so when I say important, that's a judgment call. So
Uh-huh.
I don't want to impose my values on others.
Right.
To me, it seems that I think that it seemed to me that him seeing these pictures, I think that when he thinks about flying, he thinks about Italy. And when he sees these pictures, he thinks about not him.
Okay.
I think that in my experience, it has improved my life to take responsibility for how my behavior affects others. So I want to know how my behavior affects others so that I can be a more stewardship acting member of my community.
Mm-hmm.
That the more that people see that I am looking out for them,
Mm-hmm.
the more I think that they will look out for me. And I think that
Okay.
works well for everybody. And
Okay.
so I believed, I have to look back now, but I mean, further reflection might change it a bit, but generally I feel like I was trying to help him understand me and see a perspective that he was pushing down, and that he would think that would promote reflection on his part, that he would probably, in the long run, appreciate that reflection.
Okay.
Now, if I'd done this in the 70s, when the world was in a different state than it is now, I think he could come back and say, look, man, you think this, but there's a lot of doubt and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's the case now. And yeah, did I talk to you about the Archie Bunker stuff?
No.
Oh, yeah. So do you ever watch Archie Bunker?
I've seen Archie Bunker.
Or All in the Family, I guess.
All in the Family, yes.
So for people who don't know, it was a huge TV show at the time. There were only 3 networks then.
In the 70s, yeah.
And it was the first show. So it was Archie Bunker is the patriarch of the family, and Edith was the matriarch, and he was a World War II veteran. He grew up in a world with certain values. Those values were changing in the 60s and 70s. Then he had his daughter and son. So the son his name was Michael, but Archie always called him Meathead. Archie believed he would work and the wife stayed at home and cooked. That was normal for him.
Right.
In the 70s, that was heavily questioned, to say the least. So Michael and what's her name, Gloria, the daughter, they were living more, for them equality was more about, the wife would work too. The wife had a potential for career, ought to be equal to the man's.
Right.
Well, this didn't make sense to Archie. And I think a lot of people call him like the racist or the sexist with a heart of gold. He wasn't intending to be against equality. it's just equality for him meant something different. And in his world, it was fine. So I believe that in this household, I am meathead. And the issue is, oh, and I should say, one of the reasons Archie Bunker won like all sorts of Emmys, and it's been named, I looked up its Wikipedia article recently. It was named like one of the top five TV shows of all time, right, by like TV Guide or Time Magazine or something like that. Mm-hmm. Partly because it raised questions that no television station or show at the time touched. So right. Sexism and racism and things like that. Environment was not one of the things. In today's world, someone who grew up in a past generation, there may be racism and sexism too, but those I think I don't think there's as much there are generational differences, but I think on the environment, it's a bigger thing. I think it's a bigger difference because people today, someone in high school today is looking at 40, 50, 60, 70 years of environmental degradation. Someone in their 80s is not. Mm-hmm. And someone in their 80s caused it. Mm-hmm. I mean, people might disagree on this, but there are people who feel this way, even if a particular listener doesn't. And so for me, not to take into account the next several decades, I couldn't do that. That would be like leaving the Starbucks cup on the street. Or for that matter, right. Getting the Starbucks cup in the first place. Mm-hmm. But for them, it's just like, look, man, this is what my mom said on the podcast. She's like, I grew up in South Dakota. There was no air conditioning. There was no, what were some of the other examples? It wasn't, she could fly, but let's just take air conditioning. It would often get like probably well over 100 degrees and there was no air conditioning. And now there's air conditioning. And when I would say to her, is there something you could do to act on your environmental values? All she heard was, as far as I can tell, you want me to go without air conditioning? This is what progress is for. Right. And for me to give that up, that's backward. Right. That to me, if I'm meathead, she is, I guess she would be Edith or Archie. They're not seeing that the world has changed beneath them. And things that made sense. Archie really, I believe, I didn't see the show that many times, but I believe he wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He wasn't, right. He wasn't, if he saw whites and blacks as different in some way, it's not that he was, by his world, racist. Mm-hmm. Or if he saw women had a certain place and men had a certain place. I believe that in his heart, he wasn't trying to be sexist. Right. He came from a world in which equality meant a different thing. And I believe there's the way that it looked in the 70s, someone who is from a different time looks that way.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could say from the 70s even to now, I mean, people would look at it and they would say, no, he was a racist, he was a sexist. And if you say otherwise, they're going to say that you're a racist and you're a sexist. So when this airs, and if someone hears us talking about this, they're going to say, oh no, Josh is definitely a meathead, or he's Archie. They'll say that you're Archie. And we talked about this before on a piece that you wrote about in your blog, as to the perception that people have with white men and whatnot. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Before you
But I'm going to stick with that. I'm going back to it. I'm glad you brought that up because at the time when that came out, Archie Bunker was a very popular show. And like you said, his views, would we say that he's a racist, he's a sexist because he grew up in a different time? And within his heart, he's not trying to hurt anyone. But those are the views that he had. Now, someone would say, well, he needs to change those. He needs to do this. I don't know. I think that we become so wanting to put people in buckets, good and bad, that we've gotten to the point whereby everything is black and white and you're racist and I'm not, as opposed to really looking and understanding where this person is coming from and what they're saying.
Empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Empathy. Yes.
That's why I think this is such a great opportunity right now when
Mhm.
we're stuck together. That going back to 70s sitcoms, there was always an episode of every show where they got stuck in the behind a locked door and they couldn't get out for the weekend. Like they'd be visit. I don't know. I think in Happy Days there was one where a couple of them got stuck in some. I don't know. They're stuck some behind some lock that would only open after 24 hours or something like that. And
Mhm.
at first they're like, "This is horrible," but by the end of it, they're learning things about themselves because they're stuck together.
Right.
And well, that's what we got.
That's
It's
what's happening now. People are, stuck, isolation because you can't get out, and you're discussing things as you and your stepfather would do tomorrow
yeah.
that you wouldn't ordinarily talk about. So I wonder, along those same lines with racism, if that's coming up. I'm sure that politics is coming up and people are discussing politics, but there's so many topics that are probably coming up, and people will either, as we started off saying earlier, walk away. And I think we said this in the last episode about isolation and conflicts. And you said that your mom, she's just rather just walk away and not address it. So I'm sure now people are doing the same thing. They're either saying, hey, no, let's talk about this. Let's talk about it. Why can't we talk about it? Or they're just walking away. And I was making a little note here as to how do we talk about the untalkable? Why do we, should we even talk about it? Because it's going to make someone uncomfortable. Is that is that the intent, to make the person uncomfortable, or is it the intent just to have a meaningful conversation about a topic that back in the day, or anything, you just don't talk about it. You just move on. You pretend as if though it didn't exist. My mom was like that way. If it was something that was really pressing or that was going to just like be just the emotions were going to get into it, she chose, okay, we're not going to talk about it. We'll just move on. Now, if something comes up, she's more inclined to discuss it and she'll talk about it. She'll
because of the
probably,
current situation.
well, not just because of the current situation. I think that because of time, you know, she's more, because we like to talk. I like to talk, and I want to talk about things. I want to like really dissect it and say, okay, well, I didn't understand why you did X, Y, Z, and why did you do this? And I know there's no right or wrong. Now, because of the isolation, because we've already gotten to that point. Now, if I would have pick up the phone and talk to her, she'll talk about anything and everything. And sometimes I'm like, okay, I've got to get off the phone. I've got something else to do. Now, of course, she's probably wondering, what do you have to do? You can't go, wow. So
Mhm.
why can't you talk to me? Because I'm tired. I want to do something else. But so again, uh, talking about the uncomfortable, should we? And are people bringing up those conversations because they know now you have to listen to me? I'm going to talk to my husband about lifting up the toilet seat when he goes to the john. I'm going to talk about my wife that you're not the greatest cook and it's time to get better. So things like that, or my significant other or what have you. Are these conversations coming up now, and are people talking about them? Are they talking about the Archie Bunkers, the Jeffersons, and all these other shows, things that made us uncomfortable at the time? Are we reflecting back on them and saying, hey, 10 years ago we had this conversation, and you deflected it, but I really want to talk about this, or a spouse bringing up something that the other person did they didn't like, you know because we're at this point in time, we can't get away from the other person, and there's only so many things you can watch on TV until you're just like, I'm tired of watching this over and over again. I know you have Netflix and Hula and all the other stuff, but at some point, you're going to have to see that person eye to eye and have those conversations. And are
I want to
people
take this
having
also
them?
I want to take this also to the community level,
Hmm.
because right now we're locked in with people right here. I mean, in our immediate space, and generally not our next door neighbor because we got to keep the distance.
Right.
If we were to choose to reduce our pollution. And by the way, my long-term vision is to where the population of the Earth is, where I'll get it. That I don't want to live in scarcity. I want to live in abundance.
Right.
And right now, I think all the signs that I see are that we are an overshoot, meaning we are able to sustain this population only by drawing on non-renewable resources, which will run out eventually.
But let me just add one thing. I wonder, and I think I mentioned this during the last podcast. I wonder if pollution is down to some degree, our carbon footprint. Since we've been in lockdown for the past month or so, globally, I wonder if the carbon footprint has changed.
Yeah. It's
Go ahead.
People have started measuring it, and it's
okay.
down. I think in China it was down 24%, 25%,
wow.
and
okay.
globally we're not probably there yet. But also the projections are that when
it's turned back on,
people, it's going to go right back up.
Right.
That's why leadership is such, to me, an important thing now, because people feel that they're suffering, people are hurting, people are in pain, people are dying. Are we able to create any meaning from this? Needless suffering that's like one of the worst things you can have. But I mean, I think of like Churchill in World War II. He gave meaning to, London was going down, England was going down. I mean, it looked like it wasn't going to make it. And he was rousing people to giving meaning to what they were doing. And because if you think you're going down, like, why not give up? Maybe start learning German. I mean, I wasn't there. I can't even speculate. But
right.
He brought stuff out from the heart, and no one's doing that right now. I expect that if no one, right now people are saying things like, I hope that afterward some of this sticks. I hope that I stay more in my community. I hope that I learn more, the stuff that we're talking about.
Right.
But when things change, companies are going to say, we got to get the market share back up again. Quick travel to those places. And people are going to, all this, the places that are polluting that right now aren't being patronized aren't going to sit there and say, well, we'll just declare bankruptcy. They're going to say, we got to go back and redo what we were doing. And people who are now saying, without the appeal of like the marketing, they're saying, oh, this is so great, we're getting back to our roots. But once the environment changes back again, they'll go back again, unless to me, the big thing is leadership. It can be self-discovery and reflection. One can do it on, I would still call it personal leadership. Leadership can make this stuff stick and say, we're not just reacting, but we are proactively acting. We're not just experiencing, but we're choosing. And if we like this, we could plan to incorporate it, not just see what happens next.
Right.
No, I don't see that happening. I don't see that coming from business. I don't see it coming from politics. I don't see it coming in the US. I don't see it coming in Europe and China, anywhere.
But now that you're saying that, okay, so are people, maybe this is a good time, people sit around the table and really think about climate change and what we can do to make things better. But do you think that we'll get to that point? Because people will look at it and say, that's boring. Everything that I have now, I want it. I want my cell phone. I want to be able to do this. And eventually things will come to an end, and that's just it. Having those types of conversations around the dinner table, I don't see them lasting very long at all, unless there's a person like you in every household who's going to bring it up, and then people will say, I don't want to talk about that. There are a couple of things I don't talk about: religion, politics, and climate change. They don't start making the list now. I mean, I don't see that as a topic that people would want to talk about. Or maybe you could start a meet and greet on Zoom, on YouTube, and say, hey, join this club. We're going to talk about, leadership and how we can do better, or something of that nature. and make it attractive enough that people like, well, I have nothing else to do. I'm sitting at home. Let me go and see what this guy has to say. Do you think you'll have any
I mean,
takers?
people are coming to me and talking about things like this.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, my podcast, I work with people one-on-one
Right.
to do stuff, to act on their environmental values and share it. And I do it in such a way that they generally experience some joyful, rewarding experience of it.
Right.
That's me with one person. I try to get well-known people that other people look up to, that what people want to hear their voices, so that
Right.
they can say, oh, this is a role model for me. I want to follow in their footsteps. I do the TEDx talks. Now I am trying to get that to go beyond that, because I'd like to have whole groups, and so I work with CEOs and corporate leaders, because they are very influential within their firm. If a sustainability team exists in a company and they change, but the CEO doesn't, the CEO's inaction will often overwhelm their action.
Right. But
so
are
I
these
want to work with them?
Right. But are these companies doing it so that they can just say, hey, it's almost like lip service. Hey, I'm doing this also because it's like the end thing to do. Or are they totally committed? Because if you're totally committed, you can get the next firm and the next firm and the next firm and actionable items, and then you're going to do something about it, as opposed to just saying, oh, by the way, we're a green company and we do XYZ, but are you practicing what you're saying? Because if Mr. CEO is on a jet flying here overseas to either to conduct business or to his vacation home, it's like, yeah, how much are you really into it? And I think that a lot of people like myself, we see this as happening, but we also see these same people that are saying that they're doing it, they're doing something completely different.
Well, that's where I come in, is that I try to address that. I mean, you'll see the whole spectrum. When I visited Patagonia, Yvon Chouinard is talking, what do you say? He's walking the talk. He's genuine and sincere and authentic. Is he perfect? No.
Right.
But people know that what he's trying to do, in order to make that work, a sprinter running down the track, their body's either moving toward the finish line or moving backward in order to propel the rest forward. No sideways. And then there are going to be places that are really in it. Then there are going to be places that are doing their best and they're actually moving backward.
Right.
Or they think that they're doing the best. And there's going to be places that are just by chance things are going really well. But what I try to bring is an authenticity and a genuineness. And because of that's the leadership background, on the science background, it's the effectiveness as well.
Right.
So where they are, that's going to be all over the place. But where they can move to, that's what I believe I bring to them. And what I was getting at before was that I also want to get this. I believe that what I have to share, most people will like. That is to say, based on their values about the environment, that they will act in a way that they're glad that they acted, and they'll wish they'd acted earlier. And I don't care how much people believe or are skeptical about different aspects of different parts of environmental issues. There's some stuff that matters to them. If it's mercury in their fish,
right?
That generally, or there's lots of things that people really don't want other people's garbage on their front lawn,
right?
And I believe that everyone, I could be wrong, but this feeling of stewardship, this feeling of I'm a part of something greater than myself, I think is one of the great, great human feelings. And my stage right now is to get this, not just to me one-on-one or one to a leader within a firm, but I'd love to see this spread everywhere.
Right.
I would love to. I'm talking.
But if Al Gore, who is our former VP, who was really into the climate change and whatnot, and if he was unable, and I say unable, maybe he did, to get this like at this national level, whereby you would have all these other influential people doing it, is it something to be said that people really aren't, they're just giving it lip service? And because there's so many things that they feel that if we just do this completely, we won't be able to have any fun. I can't zoom around in my jet stream. I can't, I can get on a ship and I can do this, but this is who we are. This is, because you would think that if he was pushing this And maybe he's having this conversation right now when he's in isolation with someone. He's scratching his head and saying, "How can I take this to the next level?" I was going somewhere with this during the early part of 2000. Now it's just like saunter. How can I get this back up there? Maybe there are people that are out there in isolation, and they're talking about how can we push this. If he was unable to sustain this, so to speak, that no one just like completely grabbed onto this by now, is it that people just aren't buying it? You have Bloomberg, Michael Bloomberg, you have Bill Gates, you have a lot of influential people that are talking the talk. And they're saying, hey, we need to do this and we need to do that. I mean, while they're in isolation now, are they thinking about how can we take this to the next level? What conversations are they having? Because tomorrow you're going to sit with your stepfather and you're going to have this conversation. And I'm guessing everything that we're talking about now will come up in some shape, form, or fashion, or you'll play this back to him and he'll hear it. But if all these other people aren't able to do it, even if, let's say, Oprah Winfrey were to say, wow, this is great. I mean, she's talked about, saving the environment, but not at this level to just like really push it. But again, I go back to, if Al Gore couldn't get it done, if Bill Gates, Michael Bloomberg, all these billionaires who are throwing money at this, if they couldn't get it done, or, I mean, I hate saying couldn't get it done because I'm sure in some fashion it's in the works. But if we aren't there yet, and I go back to during one of the podcasts that we had, and I said that even in the 80s, they were talking about it, climate change, and it changed and it changed, and nothing significantly happened because they're now telling us within 12 years we'll all be gone. If they weren't able to add any more time onto that timetable, and if people aren't now in isolation talking about this, I haven't heard anyone talk about it. I haven't seen anything on the internet. I haven't seen any YouTube rooms, anything on Zoom, anything on TV with them saying, hey, if you're bored, why don't you join this Zoom cast and we'll talk about this? What gives? Is it not that sexy of a topic that people want to just sit around in isolation and say, hey, let's just get everybody together and let's do a We Are the World. Let's like reach out. We'll sing a song at a certain time and let people know this is serious. If any time, I would think now would be the time to like focus in on this and get everyone's attention and say,
I
hey,
think that,
let's talk about it.
well, certainly with Gates, he's very focused on pandemics. That's been a big issue for him.
But he's focused on that, but he has been giving money to, fight global warming and all these other things. And all I'm saying is that if this is, I would think that people at this time, while they're in isolation, would say, hey, this is a good time to talk to people. Let's just really sit them down and explain this to them, as you will have to do tomorrow. And you'll definitely have to report back to us what took place and what you said, but so what are you going to say tomorrow? I mean, and it's not as if though you're trying to focus on, but and you're not, I'm sorry, you're not trying to convert him or anything. You're just saying, hey, these are my values, and I like to live by my values. And that is the reason why I made that comment. And that's the reason why I wanted to continue this conversation, because this is just who I am. And as you told me when we met, you're not trying to change me. Hey, you do what you want to do, but this makes me a better person. This is who I am. So what are you going to say?
Well, I think the conversation tomorrow, it may get to global warming and climate issues or environmental issues. Mm-hmm. I don't like to say environment, there's much more than global warming.
Right.
But I think it's actually going to be about conflict. How do we resolve conflict? I anticipate that I'll start with the story about the manager 15 years ago, 17 years ago, and say, I observed this about you. Because if he has a model for conflict that bringing it up is a problem, then bringing it up is going to be counterproductive to our relationship.
Right.
So I want to see how he views is he open for me talking about the particular issue as opposed to the meta issue of how do we talk about it?
So you're going to approach it from the line of just having conflict and being able to get beyond that. And if that is successful, then you can segue into your beliefs.
Yeah. And another thing is, there's also things about him that annoy me. So I'll probably say, you know, if appropriate behavior for you around this house is, if you don't like what I have to say, then you tell me not to say it, and I'm supposed to not say it. Well, then there are things I would like you to stop. And
maybe a fly on the wall.
well, see, this is why if I responded with that, I don't remember when this was. This was maybe 3 days ago that happened.
Uh-huh.
And the past couple of days have been pretty busy. So it's not like we're actually not interacting as much. And so,
and that's not by
really
and that's not by design. I'm sorry, not to cut you off. That's not by design. You're not interacting as much.
Right. Like today was just meeting after meeting after meeting. And
Okay.
yesterday was the same.
Okay.
And I'm greatly looking forward to Saturday. I have nothing on my schedule. So I'll be happy to, there'll be plenty of time to do that.
Right.
Had I spoken to him within the first 24 hours,
mm-hmm.
It would have been about, how do I win this? How do I get him to, you know, see it my way? How do I get him to not just see it my way, but like, how do I beat him?
So you had a post-mortem. Okay, so let me say that I'm hearing you correctly. So you said, had you spoken with him immediately afterwards, it would have been, how can I get the better half of this conversation, of this conflict?
Yeah. It would have been about my goals rather than the relationship, or it would have been seeking to impose rather than understand, seeking to speak rather than listen.
So after having a post-mortem, you thought about it and say, no, that's not the approach.
Yeah, I've had to, I mean, what works for me is usually I think about it as I'm falling asleep at night. And mm-hmm. I mean, sometimes I just fall asleep, but sometimes things kind of settle.
Right.
It's
right.
How you react when you're calm versus how you react when you're angry or impatient.
And is this part of your leadership? Do you teach this in your leadership training?
Yeah.
Because most people, not to cut you, most people, when they're in the middle of something, they want to, respond immediately and say, oh, well, you don't want me to discuss it. Well, why not? And but like you said, he said, well, we're not going to talk about it now. So there was a point there that kept you from going to the next level. So it gave you time to think about what you were going to say.
Yeah, I gave myself time to.
Okay, because at some point,
when you were speaking to me, I was like, I wanted to say, what do you want me not to talk about stuff? You don't talk about stuff. Right. That's what I was thinking. Uh-huh. But I've said those things enough times. I think it's also a matter of age and experience. And one of the big things that I have to keep in mind, I'm older than I've ever been. That goes without saying. Uh-huh. And I believe that I'm more patient. I believe that I'm more understanding. I've seen more things. Well, he's got 30 years on me. So and not only that, but I don't know what it's like to be at that stage in life.
Right.
And so maybe there's things that I just am missing the boat on.
Well, that's interesting. You said you don't know what it's like to be at that stage in life. Now, when you had the conversation with him and he came back and said, hey, proselytizing or whatever, we have friends who do that. We don't like it. So we'd prefer if you don't bring that up. Did you consciously think that? Or were you thinking that when you were in the moment? And I'm not trying to be a psychoanalyst or anything. Or was it afterwards? And I'm asking this because I'm wondering, again, what other people are going through because I'm sure that there have been a lot of heated moments during these times of isolation, and people have probably either walked away or they engaged. So I'm asking you, because this is probably going to help someone else. Were you just listening, or you just said, well, I'm not going to say anything because it's not my place and they can kick me out? So how did it get to the point? Okay.
It was every time over and over. Like, how many times do I have to relearn that when I believe this is human, but certainly for me, when I get stressed, I get very focused narrowly on details, but I feel like I understand broadly.
Right.
And this is like great in a actual fight or flight situation,
Uh-huh.
but it's very counterproductive in an ongoing relationship. And so when I feel like I know the issue, and I'm focused on like this little thing with my tunnel vision.
Yep.
Yeah, that one thing. And then, but everything, all these other things I forget about.
Right.
So I might say something that's like, just like wins this point and ruins the relationship.
Yep. Yep. I think that happens to a lot of us. Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just learned enough times, no matter how, just to be skeptical of myself, of what, if I think that I have just the right little counter retort,
right.
Probably wait an hour,
Right.
at least count 10 breaths.
Yep.
And
which is usually difficult to do because
Yeah.
we see like, wait, I'm going to win it on this. And then in hindsight, you're like, gosh, did I really? Because there's so many other avenues out there, so many other things that I didn't even take into consideration. Okay. Understood. Fair enough.
this is what makes Twitter work.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Throw in some anonymity.
Uh-huh.
And now it's like off to the races. We get blah, 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 blah.
Off to the
So I don't have anonymity with him. And I know it's like, I don't have a billion other people with accounts in this relationship. It's us.
Right. Yeah.
That's why I keep coming back to the word opportunity when you keep talking about, you're going to see this person the next day.
Yeah.
What if you say something like, now they know me, now I know them. And likewise, if we choose to localize our communities more and to spend more time with our neighbors, say that isolation is gone, we have a vaccine. And I believe that we have an opportunity to get to know our neighbors, not as well as we know our family.
Right.
But what do we lose if we're all escaping all the time? How much more litter do we tolerate if we know that we're going to get away?
Right.
How much more think of all the conflicts that you have with neighbors of like, whose tree is it, and can I rent out my apartment on Airbnb or not? What kind of plants can you grow in the front yard if you're in a desert region? And there's millions of these things, and everyone's escaping all the time. It's like, whatever.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why people want to escape, because they get tired of just being around the neighbors, developing groupthink. We're thinking the same thing. And if I'm able to get out, I'm able to experience different thought patterns and see the world differently. But in doing so, you do miss that community type setting. And now it's forced upon us, definitely within our own homes and people that we're staying with.
Yeah. The emotional systems, you talked about, if flying brings you fun and adventure, we do not, I probably said this last time, but we don't have more emotions now than they used to before. People, any experience that we have, we're experiencing something that others did too. But they didn't have airplanes. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have lots of things.
Right.
I'm not proposing absolutely getting rid of these things.
Right.
But curbing their use somewhat. It's not about curbing the use. It's about, if you feel that the way to adventure is buying an airplane ticket to some place, the more that you feel that that's necessary, the more you depend on others for your adventure. And the more your ability to create adventure will atrophy. And I believe, not necessarily, but in most cases, that people have less adventure in their lives because of this. Not more, but less. They have less experiencing other cultures and cuisine, because to the extent that you feel you depend on it from others, you don't get it. You don't create it. You said people staying together get groupthink. I think it's the opposite. Groupthink happens in certain situations, not interacting with neighbors. That's not, actually you get arguments with neighbors. I mean, the phrase, good fences make good neighbors. I'm not saying everyone getting together and holding hands all the time.
Right.
But resolving conflict, facing conflict and resolving it. And there's no final answer. I think of one model, New England town halls. It brought people together. Look up Sudbury Valley School, the school in Sudbury, Massachusetts, where there are no classes. And I thought that sounds crazy. Students get to vote on everything. They get the same, a 5-year-old student gets the same vote as the guy who founded the school.
Mm-hmm.
And they learn democracy more than they might learn some math or something like that. If they choose to hire a teacher, if the students vote that they want to take a math class, then they'll find a math teacher and come in and teach the class. That's nice, but what they really learn is how to interact with each other, and it's amazing.
What project was this? You said suburbs.
Sudbury Valley School. So it's named after Sudbury, Massachusetts. And Peter Gray's column in Psychology Today and his book, Free to Learn, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've had him on my podcast, and I had a woman who graduated from Sudbury Valley. I really wanted to know what it was like. And
mm-hmm.
she described, she was kicked out of every school in Boston. She just rebelled against authority.
Uh-huh.
When she went to Sudbury, she actually spent more time. She spent a lot of time with the adults, working on the rules. It's not that she didn't like rules. In fact, Sudbury has as many rules as any place. But when you participate in creating them, and you see what happens if you have no rules,
right?
Then you're engaged and you participate.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I say choose not to fly right now, even if you're not flying. Participate, active, lead, as opposed to follow. I mean,
right.
Leadership has a lot of following in it. Lead as opposed to react.
Mm-hmm.
And our educated, you were talking about Gore and Gates, and I forget who else. Bloomberg. I don't think of Bloomberg. I think he was a very polluting person. All of them, actually.
But they think that they're, they
strong.
But they feel as if though that they're, trying to, they're throwing money at fighting climate change or what have you. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it makes them feel altruism that, hey, we're doing this and this makes me a better person than you.
I don't know if they think that. I mean, maybe they do. I don't know. I haven't met them, so I can't say.
From what from just reading some of the things, and even if you haven't met them, just look at their lifestyle. They're putting money there, but yet, and then they're telling other people, well, this is what we've got to do, but yet still they're flying around on the Gulf Stream.
Yeah, I think there's a model in education that says, teacher knows, student doesn't. Teacher gives information to student learns and now knows what to do.
Right.
That, I don't agree with that model.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of people think if I give someone information, then that will change them. But facts and motivation don't correlate nearly like people think. And if you grew up in a world, as virtually all Americans did, where authority connotes and can force or compel behavior, it's very easy to emerge from a system like that and think, all right, well, I'm going to give the information out and people will get it. And if they don't get it, there's something wrong with them, not me. But that model, I don't agree with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that, I'm not aware of many leaders in the past who got there through knowing more facts or led effectively by giving more facts.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more about empathy, much more about, you listen to Patton, loved his men.
Right.
He wasn't choosing that word accidentally, love. He knew he had to understand them deeply, and they went to war for him. I mean, there were obviously lots of other reasons, but they loved him back. Not all of them.
Right.
And he didn't know more facts than others.
Right.
He wasn't, and he's just one of many.
Uh-huh.
So if people come up with this model, and Silicon Valley has this model of like technology, I don't want to get into that. There's a whole other, if you operate within a certain model, you can do it. And maybe my model is ineffective. I don't know. I think it's effective.
Uh-huh.
But if they have a model that says that giving all this money away, they may have a model that in their model makes a lot of sense. And someone from a different perspective says, well, that's hypocritical. I don't look at it as hypocritical. I just think of it as working on a model that I think was effective, may have been effective at a certain time, but may not be effective now.
Mm-hmm.
I think that to think here, I read this, therefore I know, and I'm going to tell you, and you will agree. It makes a lot of sense. I think that to reach the next stage, it has to come from, there has to be an authenticity and a genuineness that comes through practice.
Mm.
And people who haven't practiced don't really know it. I feel like, I mean, look, if you go to the gym enough, there's the guy who comes in and has read a bunch of books on lifting weights, has never lifted weights, and starts giving advice to the person who's been going there for a long time.
Right.
Or I told this to a friend, and he said his wife sings opera. I forget if I said this before. And he's like, I can't believe your patience when all these people after the show, people come and give you advice on how to sing opera better. They clearly have never sung opera, but they feel like they're doing you a favor, and they're actually sounding very patronizing. And it must be frustrating to listen to them, but people do that.
Yep.
And however much money Bill Gates has, however many pieces of software he's sold, if he hasn't experienced something, he's as neophyte as anybody.
Right.
And same with Al Gore, same with you, same with me, same with everyone. Mm-hmm. What compels me to act is my experience of going without what looks like on the outside, what I thought was going to be going without, say, packaged food, and ended up being joyful abundance, meaning meeting my farmers. And
joyful abundance.
Yeah, I mean, you see me when I'm eating.
Right.
It's like I can't stop. Like I just love it.
Mm-hmm.
And up here I'm doing all this work. Actually, that's something coming up. Actually, it's something that my stepfather had the idea of volunteering at the food hub,
right,
where we're going to get local food. And now I'm going to volunteer there on Wednesday. So we're signed up for that, and we want to help. My main thing is I want to meet people who are into providing local food. He's really into, one of his great skills is he can figure out processes. He was an engineer, and he wants to go, there's all this plastic now that isn't, they're just like, look, we got to get the food out. We got this disease. We got to work this. And they just went with what was quickest, and they realize it's a problem, and he realizes it's a problem. And so he wants to help with that. And I want to meet people. So we're going to go there and volunteer next week.
Right.
And yeah, let me give the overall context of my annoyance with him on this one thing. It's like small compared to everything else. And I should have said that at the very beginning. It's really tempest in a teapot. It's no, I'm sorry, the other way around. It's a small thing. It's within the whole scheme of things. A year from now, I might not even remember that conversation. I mean, he's my stepfather.
Right.
There's amount we've been through, and it's a lot.
Just, you guys are going to practice social distancing when you do go to the farm, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the whole thing is why they have to do all this plastic, and they have this whole system of like the car has to park outside, and you have to call them. It used to be you go in the building, pick up your stuff.
Right.
Now you call them, and then the team that's in the building has to go and do their thing. Mm-hmm. Get all the farmers bring giant pallets of food, so it's still bulk for them, and then the crew there sorts it all out. Mm-hmm. And so we have to sit in our cars waiting until they bring the food out to us. No, they call us out on a loudspeaker, and then we have to go one at a time pick up the food. So there's all this stuff going on. It's not efficient, but it's safe.
Right, but I see this as being definitely something that you and your stepfather can bond on. The whole going inside, yeah. And you guys have never discussed this before? You've never done this before.
Not here. I mean, there's precedent of he's always gardened and stuff like that, but we've never been through. We volunteered a food thing. My mom, my dad, and my stepfather back in Philadelphia before I was born, and when I was very, very young, they all separately and together, in a sense, they knew each other. They participated in a couple different food co-ops that started in Philadelphia. And at the time, the food co-op meant maybe, I don't know, a dozen or 20 or 30, I don't know, a bunch of families would get together, and they would put in their order.
Right.
Each would take their turn, and they'd drive down to South Philly to the food distribution center and get food for everyone by buying in bulk.
Right.
By going there and knowing the people, they could pick out the better produce.
Right.
They get it cheaper. So everyone had to take a turn going down at like 4 a.m. down to South Philly, hanging out with Sylvester Stallone. I mean, he was older, but you know,
Right.
and then coming back up, and then that like Wednesday, you'd go in and pick up your share, and gradually those co-ops all merged or disappeared into, there's like one Weaver's Way co-op, which is like a big Philadelphia institution. And growing up, that co-op was always a part of my life because both sides of the family would shop there. It was a very community thing. In fact, I just learned this. If you join the food co-op Weaver's Way in Philadelphia now, you're member number 10,000 something. It's a 5-digit number. My dad is 56. He's number 56. And I just found out my stepfather is actually a smaller number. It's kind of cool. And so food and community have always been a thread going through my family.
Right. So this is definitely something that you could probably bring up tomorrow during the Water Beer Summit, and you can hopefully like connect the two somehow as to him doing this and you living your values and choosing not to fly because of the environment and whatnot.
Yeah, I've learned that I have to come. I'm glad I'm saying this to you now as if I'd remembered it earlier, and I have to re-remember it many times in life. I believe that if I come in and I feel like he's got to learn something from me, but I'm not open to learning something from him, then he will probably not be open to learning. I will lead him to not want to learn from me.
Right. Josh, were you a hothead back in the day?
Oh yeah. Well, in some areas, yes. In some areas, no.
Okay.
Most of my family members would probably call me stubborn. But the other side of stubborn is misunderstood because a lot of people call
you don't understand me.
Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. Like I didn't really like doing chores. There's a level of cleanliness or of less than cleanliness that was comfortable to me that wasn't comfortable to my parents.
Right.
And so they would make me clean the apartment or the house when I didn't think it was needed cleaning.
Right.
They were probably trying to discipline me as well and still discipline me and so forth.
All
right. Well, now I keep my apartment cleaner than they ever did. I make my bed every morning. You know, in the first minute of waking up, I make my bed.
Right.
It's like that woman that I talked about who graduated Sudbury Valley School. And by the way, her film showed at Sundance and she's worked with Eric Bogosian. She's like a very successful film theater person.
Okay, Josh, could you say it again? Because I was trying to Google it. What high school?
Sudbury.
Oh, Sudbury. Okay, Sudbury. Okay.
Yeah, and Peter Gray and his writing on it is, for me, transformative. If I don't have kids of my own, but if I did, I would very strongly consider putting them into a school like that. Peter
Gray, Gray.
Yeah. And his column in Psychology Today, or if you look him up on my podcast, on my blog,
okay.
I have a page of like my favorite posts. Although he's posting since that, so there's more recent ones.
Okay, I found
there's one that talks about how the way we treat students today, work longer hours than their parents. Right. They have less freedom than prisoners. We spend less money on them than we do on prisoners. It's coercion. I mean, we're teaching the opposite of democracy. It's one of the most authoritarian institutions in this country is our schools.
Right. Okay.
Now, that's just me talking. Look up how Peter Gray writes up because he can speak with more experience and knowledge.
Okay. Okay. Well, Josh, this has been very enlightening, our conversation. I wish
we're 90 minutes in.
I wish you well during the Water Beer Summit tomorrow. We'll definitely have to do a follow-up so that you can let the listeners know what exactly transpired, what happened, because it sounds really interesting as to what you're about to partake in on tomorrow.
Maybe others are thinking to themselves, oh man, at least it's not like that.
Well, like I said, I'm sure that during this time of isolation, that people are definitely encountering things, forming new relationships. And I keep saying that over and over again, that, so this is, our interpretation, or we're giving them, the viewers or listeners, the insight into what we're seeing and what we're going through. So I would definitely encourage them to come back and listen, because we have a whole list of things that we're going to talk about that we had been planning on talk about, but that we're going to talk about before we were, this forced upon us isolation that, we're doing it now. So, and I'm sure there will be a different spin on it. So definitely come back, tune in. You can follow Josh and read his podcast. Josh, you want to give that information?
Yeah, it's all at joshuaspodek.com. So JOSHUASPODEK.com. And you put it up, you put the links up in the previous one. So I imagine it'll go up. And then you just upper right corner.
Absolutely.
Podcast.
Yep.
And while we're at it, look at my books, Leadership Step by Step and Initiative.
Mm-hmm. And again, you can follow me on Twitter, RobJH1. And thank you for listening. And we look forward to your feedback.